Alright guys, Tetrabbit here today. I want to talk through the Midnight Esports saga, I guess you could say, so far. There were some pretty explicit leaks that came out yesterday to do with, well, supposedly, how the situation has developed from signing with Midnight all the way to the present day. It may well continue into the future, but yeah, we'll go through everything that's been announced. We'll go through some relevant tweets and some relevant context based on the Accelerate situation as well. Don't really want to go through the Accelerate stuff today. I did link BZ's video yesterday. I'll link it down again in the description box below today if you want to watch through his truth about Accelerate, and yeah, hopefully I'll go through that in a couple of days time when, well, with any luck, we get some sort of input from the Accelerate guys, from MLG per se, which might give us more both sides of the story. So we seem to have got a lot of explicit stuff on Midnight here, don't quite have it on Accelerate, but I will be relating both situations because they do seem very similar indeed. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Like if you do, subscribe if you're new. As always, I'd greatly appreciate it. The support lately has been fantastic. 10k, it seems to be getting closer by the day, so well it is. So yeah, quality stuff. Let's go through some news first of all. Grind Time Gaming have picked up Tish, Pemby, Nelson, Mosh and Kolchan. Pemby I think was the coach of Accelerate, so that kind of gives you a good idea of exactly what's going on there. We have this from Decimate saying he's not going to be competing at Fort Worth. It's in his best interest to wait this one out and see what the future has in store for me. Says that G2, they're not really holding him to any particular contract, but obviously he's probably getting paid to sit on the bench at G2, and he's pretty happy just to sit by that with no other organisation wanting to get him quite yet, but maybe in the next roster change period he'll get his opportunity. Seems like Ferro is going to be doing a similar thing. Will not be competing at Fort Worth. Feel like it's in my best interest to wait this one out. Literally the same tweet that Decimate did, so I guess there's something going on there and they've got something figured out. Spacely may well have a team actually. He got dropped from Genji a couple of days ago. Seems like he may well have a team for Fort Worth. Then I did want to mention a couple of things to do with Accelerate because some nice gentleman in the comment section below yesterday said that I should talk about what Hastro's trying to do for the guys of Accelerate. Hate to see what happened to the Accelerate COD team. Tag the players and let them know I'm willing to help them get to Fort Worth on my dime. I'll do whatever I can to help them get there and compete. So quality stuff from Hastro. Also another thing just quickly on the Accelerate situation. I will go into more depth on this in a couple of days time, but as I say, the Midnight and the Accelerate situation are, well, somewhat similar to say the least. So Scoots, some of you guys may know this man, legend of esports, says, hey Justin Tan, who is the CEO of Accelerate, does your investor, also known as your father John Tan, know you are ruining his investment? Hopefully he grounds you and takes away your CEO toy. And then we get this announcement from UIU, welcoming Parzelion. This gives a nice segue into what I want to talk about here with Midnight. So Parzelion is being moved onto UIU for Skies, so he's going to be the ICR. Methods is going to use a Maddox, it does seem. And as we said, Envoy is likely going on to Gen G in place of Spacely, so that leaves a lot of questions surrounding Midnight, and considering they did so well in the first couple of weeks, why exactly have they split up? So let's go through all that now. This is an anonymous post that got sent to the Intel Call of Duty account last night. I'll link this tweet down in the description box below, and yeah, we're just going to walk through it right here. So from the beginning with Midnight, now as I say, this is speculation, this is coming from one source, but it seems to be very explicit. This guy obviously knows kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Take this with a grain of salt, which is my favourite phrase, but it does seem relatively concrete. The team signed a contract to represent Midnight heading into the PLQ, which is January time, with an option to extend if they qualified. Once the team qualified, Midnight tried to hold them to the contract, even though the renewal period and contract had expired due to not being sent to the players by the deadline. The players reached out to MLG, knowing the original contract was not valid because it wasn't submitted by the deadline, which is, we've been doing some contract law stuff at uni, and, well, this all falls in line with that. And were told by MLG that they needed to work it out with the organisation or their spot would be given to another team. Interesting. The owners at Midnight informed the players they must sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, before they would receive their individual pro contracts. At that point, players hired legal assistance from 3 lawyers. This may have been when Envoy was tweeting about, like, someone get me a lawyer, right? I did that video, I'll link that down in the description box below if you want to know about what the situation was looking like at that time. 3 lawyers to represent each of them except for Devin. Now, Devin is Llama God, who then received his contract right away and signed for unknown reasons. The attorneys worked through the non-disclosure agreement. An NDA effectively means that players can't go public with stuff that the organisation doesn't want them to go public with, before advising players to sign. Finally, they received contracts and with guidance from legal assistants were advised not to sign at this point until reviewed. So, the players took off for Columbus for the Pro League at the start of February and were killing it in their divisional play. They went undefeated the first week. They beat Optic 3-0 in their very first match, of course, with the substitute, but, obviously they were playing very, very well. The Midnight owner showed up in Columbus at the end of week 1, told the players they'd be receiving the $550 that was agreed per their first contract. Now, supposedly, this contract was not valid and it expired because it had run out of time before they could even sign it way back in January time. So, The guy says whoever leaks this, what a way to deflate the player's mindset right before week 2 begins, and they end up losing their first 2 matches of the second week. So, well, whether that was to do with this situation or whether other teams were catching on, who knows. The players are advised by their lawyers not to sign the contract until they've redlined all the issues. So redline, basically just going through with a fine toothpick, figuring out exactly where the contradictions are. For example, one paragraph they were employees of the organisation, next paragraph they were contractors. And those sort of ambiguities cause real problems for the players, because if you were going to sign this and go to court, then the court could look at that and say, well, this is ambiguous, this contract is not valid, therefore you don't get owed any money, or something along those lines. These things are possible. So I'm very happy that these guys decided to seek legal assistance, but anyway, amongst many other issues such as no way out of the contract bound them to 2 or 3 years. This is what's interesting. This is what BZ talked about in his video to do with Accelerate as well. Whenever an organisation, which is, well, relatively low tier, it's very unlikely Midnight are going to be able to get a franchise spot. When these guys say they're going to tie you to a 2 to 3 year contract, you know what that means. You know that it doesn't mean that they actually want to play with you in the next year. It means they want to sell you on. They want to lock you down for such a long period of time that they can force a big buyout from another team that's going to come out. So, well, the lawyers and the players obviously realise something like that. The organisation could drop them at any time. So February the 8th, the players' attorney sent the redline version, the updated version, the thing that they wanted to see, off to the Midnight owner with no reply. Weeks go by and the players are advised that the organisation now has an attorney to represent them. So Midnight's attorney finally reached out to the players on a Friday, introduced himself and said he'd be getting back to them on the following Monday. At this point, the players hoped that they would now get somewhere with the contracts. They were wrong, supposedly. Midnight's attorney was contacted numerous times by phone until days later, saying that the organisation wanted to inform them there had been no negotiations. Strangely enough, Midnight's attorney turned right around and called back within a few minutes, stating he'd made a mistake and the owner wanted him to state the earlier phone conversation, but now they were going to look through the red lines and would be getting back to them. What's interesting here is there were no monetary negotiations that ever came about at this point. It's all about the redlining and situations like that. Nothing to do with the actual money that these guys are going to get paid from being a league team, which should, well, I would have hoped that the MLG rulebook would have given some minimum salary requirements for a league team. And I think that the people at MLG may have thought that, well, these organisations that are coming in with amateur squads, they'll just get picked up and bought out by the bigger league guys and we don't have to worry about anything like that. But as it turns out, that's not how it is. Maybe Call of Duty isn't as attractive as they thought, or maybe these bigger organisations just think, well, if we're going to buy a franchise spot next season, what's the point buying a spot now, even if it's much cheaper, because then we're going to have to sign other players and it's going to be a stress. Let's just get in next season. I don't think the CWL were predicting that and it's led to a lot of issues here. So Midnight and their attorney would never get back to the players' attorney nor the players. On February the 27th, during a scrimmage with Optic, the 4 players had not signed the inconsistent contract and were blocked along with their coach, who was Ricky Atura, via Twitter by the Midnight owners. I heard about this a few days ago and this kind of backs that up. Midnight was attempting to drop the players, which was then denied by MLG. So apparently MLG have actually done something for once in this situation. Midnight owners suddenly unblocked and refollowed the players and coach. They proceeded to notify Jet Li that he would be moved to the sub spot and stated he was no longer invited to Fort Worth. Coach Atura was also received a message saying that he was released as coach and no longer invited to Fort Worth. This lines up with this tweet from Brack's father at a similar kind of time, saying that Jet Li's going to get moved to substitute. The team will not be successful. Why did you do that? Mess up team chemistry, etc., etc. that I talked about at the time. Moving onwards, the players were then receiving DMs with multiple threats to sign the contract or to be dropped. Rings a lot of bells with the Accelerate situation that BZ was talking about, where effectively the organisation was trying to use the league spot as leverage and to some degree as blackmail to make the players sign the contract, or else they would be dropped and have no chance to play in the league. Threatening DMs, supposedly, of course, this is just one side of the story, from owner to players while they are being represented by an attorney meant no other option but to escalate to MLG. The players and lawyers believe that their only option now is to send in an official petition to revoke the license of Midnight on behalf of the players. This was due to the owner of Midnight, we'll have a look at some of his tweets in a second, not abiding to the very own MLG rules and handbook and for violating the Code of Conduct and the Fair Labour Standards Act. Very interesting. MLG decided not to revoke the license due to having conducted a detailed investigation on Midnight, and with the event being next week, it was unrealistic to do so. So I think this situation is after what happened with Accelerate. It does seem like that kind of timeline. If you watch the last 10 minutes of BZ's video, which I would recommend you do down in the description box below, in that video, he talks about how he went to MLG with his team to say that the team was blackmailing him and that Accelerate were refusing to pay the amount of money that was promised in the contract. And MLG kind of said, well, at least according to BZ, that they couldn't really do anything about it. Here it looks like they actually tried to take some action, but maybe there's no other team, no other organisation that wants to buy out these guys' spot, to the point where MLG have to just try and figure things out and try and keep these guys in the league, because otherwise, well, what are you going to do? If you can't get another team to buy out the spot, then you have to stick with these guys. The lawyers also mentioned that MLG had asked Midnight to negotiate with the players in good faith, which is kind of a legal term that implies that both sides of the party are reasonable people, which is, well, maybe an issue here. Midnight owners continue to stonewall the players and not deliver any type of direct contact with them. MLG granted the players the official permission to be transferred over to any team. Although the 5 players undoubtedly wanted to stick together, this was now made impossible under the circumstances with Midnight. They were compelled to give up their 5-2 record and seek any individual or package opportunity within the Pro League. The 4 players were in talks with an organisation to be transferred over as a package. However, Envoy received an option, from another organisation, and Parzelion had an offer from UYU, which we talked about in a second. So Brack and Jetli are attempting to solidify their spot to continue in the Pro League before the roster lock timeframe. It's with no question these players did absolutely everything in their power to keep the roster together within a healthy and professional organisation, but were unsuccessful. So that pretty much concludes that. We get this tweet from Adam Apicella. He's basically the head guy at MLG. Don't mistake silence for inaction. They haven't made any comments about this publicly of MLG, so supposedly Adam and Co are trying to figure something out behind the scenes. I would hazard to say that the rules that they introduced, the fact that they gave so much power and the ability to drop absolutely everyone to the organizations, made a really optimistic assumption about the quality of the teams that were going to be in the Pro League. I think they made the assumption that if a team like Midnight, a team like Accelerate were going to get into league, they would get bought out by a FaZe or whoever didn't make the league. They would get bought out by a TSM, bought out by a CLG. Bought out by a Cloud9, I don't know, those kind of teams, and, they would be respectable organisations. But as it turns out, they give so much power in a non-franchise league to teams that just don't have, just amateurish. And the situation is inevitable, I feel. Atura tweets this, which is pretty sad to see, still in disbelief how quickly this spiraled out of control. The team was looking unstoppable leading up to the event less than a week ago, and dropping less than 2 maps a series unless it was against OG, in which they were usually neck and neck, etc, etc. I want to say thank you to Parzelion, Bragg, Llama God, Dylan Envoy and Jet Li for giving me the opportunity to be there as coach. A once in a lifetime experience I'll never want to take back regardless of outcome. And hashtag what could have been. And yeah, Envoy tweets this out, truly distraught that Jet Li, Bragg, Parzelion, Llama God, Ricky and I will never see the true potential and ceiling of us together. We actually had something so special that we tried so hard to keep, just couldn't. So really a tragic situation. Midnight clearly wanted to stick together. They had so much success. And as it turns out, the organisation and MLG and, well, I guess there's blame to be laid at either side, but it's not ended well for these guys. And this is a tweet from Brian saying, it's Midnight breaking up before a single event is going to end up being one of the biggest what-ifs in COD history. And, well, there's a reply from Crimsix. You can pause the video if you want to look through that. Now, these are some tweets from the CEO of Midnight, K2, whatever the guy's name is. Selling no, franchise yes, next question. And a lot of tweets along a similar vein. One of the ones he did this morning was kind of surprising to me. Staying in the league is more important than getting into the league. Don't be fooled with short-term offers. They will succeed this year. Next season is a franchise. Why is everything in caps, my boy? GG Midnight will be making a statement on Championship Sunday in Fort Worth. Rumours and gossip take second place to on the field accomplishments. See you in Texas. So here he is. This guy is just something else. And yeah, I kind of wanted to leave it there. I'm really intrigued to see what will happen in the next couple of days surrounding Midnight. Because yes, 2 of the players. Envoy's gone to Gen G, it does seem. Parzelion's definitely gone to UYU. The rest of the guys are trying to find their spot somewhere or other. It seems like Midnight have to be in conversation right now with MLG to try and get some things sorted out. MLG hopefully going to kick some sense into this guy. Because it seems relatively obvious to me that they were just trying to abuse their players. They tried to make them sign this long-term contract that, well, inevitably they were just going to try and sell on the players. There's no way they realistically think they're going to get a league spot here. The cost of franchising have been rumoured to be somewhere between $5 million and like $15 million. There's no way that these guys can afford that straight off the back. I would be incredibly surprised if they even had that possibility, and I'm sure that MLG have got some reservations about doing it anyway, even if they did have the money off the back of what's happened with this team right here. Where the rest of the guys will end up is a really interesting scenario. Whether Midnight will be able or even want to, because in this guy's opinion, he doesn't want to sell it, clearly. Unless, as I say, MLG can maybe talk some sense into this guy. If Midnight Esports are still an organisation in the CWL because no bigger organisation wants to buy out their spot, then we have a really tough situation on our hands. MLG are probably going to have to be micromanaging everything because, well, Spacely says he's got a potential team. I don't know how many teams there are in the league still looking to make changes, but maybe he slots into a Midnight somewhere. There are a lot of players like Parasite, those sort of guys that were being considered to get on a team like this. If Midnight is the organization that ends up being a home for those guys, well, I don't know what's going to happen, because if these guys are still in charge, then this kind of dodgy stuff is going to keep happening towards the future. And well, I'm sure a lot of people would be hoping that Accelerate and Midnight are straight out of Call of Duty and we never see the likes of these guys again, especially with the franchise league coming around. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case right now, and a lot of these players still have to find homes, and it's a really tough situation, and I think a lot of it is on the back of the rules that we've had this season. I think a very optimistic stance from MLG that they took, giving power to organisations that haven't even had to buy the spot and, you know, don't have the money to support it. Just such amateurish stuff, and it's really come at the cost of players this season. So leave your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.